Hello friends. About 99% of friends who watch my videos are not subscribed, and I would be very happy if you did. Also, don't forget to press the like button and leave your comments. Your interaction makes the content reach everyone and helps the channel grow. Also, let me know in the comments from which country you are watching the video. Alright folks, buckle up because what I'm about to tell you ain't no ordinary trucker's tale. This is the kind of story that'll make you think twice before hitting those long, lonely stretches of highway at night. I remember pulling into this old truck stop off Route 62. No lights, no signs, just this battered-looking building with one flickering bulb over the door and a single diesel pump. It wasn't on my GPS, but I was dead tired, and that eerie hum from the CB radio had started up again, that static-drenched whisper saying my name over and over like a chant. I figured maybe the place would have coffee or a phone I could use to report the weirdness, but stepping out of my cab I felt it. The air was too still, too thick, the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums. I stepped inside and it was like walking into the past. The walls were lined with faded photos. Trucks from the 60s and 70s, drivers with eyes scratched out like someone took a knife to them. A thin man stood behind the counter, wearing a trucker cap and a crooked smile. "Been waiting on you," he said, and I damn near turned around and ran right then. But I was rooted, not just with fear. Something about that place held me. The man slid a steaming cup of black coffee toward me, even though I never told him what I wanted. "Long road behind you," he said, "but longer one ahead." I tried to laugh it off, asked if he knew what was messing with my CB. He just stared. That's when I noticed the mirror behind the counter didn't show my reflection. It showed my rig parked out front, but the cab was empty, and something was sitting in the passenger seat. Tall, shadowy, motionless. I blinked, looked back at the door, still parked out front, still alone. I looked back at the mirror. Same thing. That thing in the seat. "You've been marked," the man whispered, like it was some terrible secret he wasn't supposed to tell. "It rides with you now. You opened a door you didn't mean to. The roads out there? They got rules, and you broke one." I asked him what the hell he was talking about, and he pointed to a photo on the wall. It was me. Same jacket, same hat, same truck, standing in front of a different rig from decades ago. The date said 1974. "You ever feel like you've been here before?" he asked. I ran out that place, heart pounding, jumped in the cab, locked the doors. The figure in the passenger seat was gone, but I could feel the seat still warm. I hit the gas, tires spinning in gravel. Didn't stop until I hit the next state line. But I ain't been right since. Every time I check the mirrors now, I see glimpses. Someone sitting there, watching. Always watching. I kept driving, hoping. Distance would put space between me and whatever the hell that was, but something had changed. My rig didn't feel the same under me anymore. The wheel had this faint resistance, like something else had its hands on it too. Every few miles, the rear view would catch a shadow that shouldn't be there, a flicker of movement behind me even when I knew damn well I was alone. But the worst part? The smell. It started faint, like burnt oil and rotting wood, then stronger. It filled the cab like a dead forest after a rain, like something ancient and long buried was clawing its way up through the floorboards. I tried to distract myself, put on some music, rolled the windows down, anything to chase away the creeping chill. But nothing worked. Somewhere outside Amarillo, I pulled off into a way station. Just wanted to breathe, feel the open air, maybe shake off the dread that had been clinging to me like wet clothes. The attendant was this older woman, looked like she'd seen every mile of highway there was, and when I walked in, she froze. Her eyes locked on me like she'd seen a ghost. "You brought something with you," she said, backing away slowly. "You need to leave now, right now." I asked what she meant, but she wouldn't answer, just pointed to the door, trembling like I'd dragged death through her lobby. I left, confused and on edge, but when I got back to the truck, I noticed something scratched into the driver's side door. It hadn't been there before. 5 deep gouges like claw marks, freshly carved into the metal. I ran my hand over them, heart pounding. Not rusted, not old. New. That night I couldn't sleep, so I just kept driving. Open road, yellow lines blurring past under the glow of my headlights. At 3:14 a.m., the CB came alive again. This time, it wasn't whispers. It was laughter, slow, low, and wrong, like a growl being choked back. "Still running, trucker," it said in that crackling voice. "But we're patient. We ride beside you now." I yanked the cord out of the radio, but the voice kept going. No power, no connection, just the voice. And then the laugh again. I don't know what I picked up out there or what I disturbed on those roads, but I know this: it doesn't let go. It rides with me now, and I think it always has. I just didn't know it until now. I drove for hours after that, pushing the engine harder than I ever had before, like I could outrun the voice that had wormed its way into my cab. The road stretched out in front of me like a black ribbon with no end, only the hum of tires and that ever-present feeling that I was never truly alone. Even with the CB unplugged and the radio silent, I kept hearing things. Soft knocks from inside the trailer, like someone tapping slowly with their knuckles, patient and deliberate. And once, I swear I heard breathing right behind my seat. I whipped around so fast I almost lost control of the rig, but there was no one there, just shadows and that faint smell of decay that had sunk into everything. I tried calling a buddy of mine, another trucker named Ray, hoping to talk it out, maybe get grounded. Ray was a skeptic, didn't believe in ghosts or any of that supernatural crap, but he listened. And when I told him what I'd been hearing and seeing, he got real quiet on the other end. Then he said, "You been driving through Route 74 at night?" I said, "Yeah." That's when he told me something I wish I hadn't heard. There's been stories for decades about that stretch of highway. Truckers vanishing mid-haul, rigs found abandoned with the engines still running, doors wide open like the driver just stepped out and never came back. Some even say there's a creature out there, something old tied to the land, something that doesn't like being disturbed. I asked him what it looked like, if anyone had seen it. He said no, one who saw it ever made it back. That chilled me more than anything. After I hung up with Ray, I pulled into a diner, one of those late-night places with flickering neon and a jukebox that hadn't worked since the 70s. I figured I'd grab a coffee, shake the nerves, but when I walked in, every head turned. The waitress, an older woman with tired eyes and a name tag that said Ellen, walked up and whispered, "You're bleeding." I looked down. There was a long scratch across my forearm like from a branch or claws, but I hadn't been anywhere near trees. And the blood was dry, like it had been there for hours, though I hadn't felt a thing. Ellen handed me a towel and said something else under her breath, something that haunts me still. "You didn't bring it in here, did you?" That's when I realized this thing wasn't tied to the road anymore. It had attached itself to me. I didn't know what to say. I stood there in that old diner with that scratch on my arm and Ellen staring at me like I'd just dragged death through her front door. The other folks in the place wouldn't look me in the eye. One old-timer got up, dropped cash on the table without finishing his food, and muttered something about not tempting fate. Ellen motioned for me to sit in the booth farthest from the windows. She brought over a mug of black coffee and said quietly, "You need to leave before it realizes you've stopped." I asked her what she meant, and she just shook her head. "They call it the hitchhiker. Not because it waits for a ride, it already knows how to ride with you. Latches on, crawls in through the cracks when your guard's down. It's been doing it a long time." I asked her if she'd seen it. She said once 30 years ago, said she was riding with her husband, a hauler like me, when he picked up something on Route 74. A figure on the side of the road they thought was a stranded motorist. By the time they realized it wasn't human, it was too late. Her husband disappeared that night. Vanished from the locked cab while they were stopped at a way station. Ellen never drove again. Never even left town. "If it's got its claws in you," she said, "you can't outrun it. Only thing you can do is keep moving. Don't stop too long, don't sleep too deep, and never drive with both mirrors up." I asked her what she meant about the mirrors, and she leaned in close, whispering, "That's how it watches. Through reflections. That's how it finds its way back in." I didn't argue. I left cash on the table, thanked her, and headed. Back to my rig. When I got in, I reached up and folded the passenger side mirror in. Maybe it wouldn't help, but it made me feel a little less exposed. The engine groaned to life and I hit the road again, not caring where I ended up, just needing distance between me and whatever had hitched a ride. As I pulled onto the highway, I caught a glimpse of movement in the rear view. Just a shadow. A flicker, but it was enough to send a chill down my spine. I checked the passenger seat, still empty. But the cab felt full, heavy, like I wasn't driving alone. I kept my eyes straight ahead, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The stretch of highway ahead looked normal. Empty asphalt bathed in moonlight, guardrails gleaming. In the distance, but the feeling in the cab told a different story. You ever feel like you're being watched even when there's no one around? That kind of tension that sits heavy on your shoulders like invisible hands pressing down? That's exactly what I felt. The air felt dense, like breathing through syrup. Every bump in the road echoed through the cab like a drumbeat warning me I wasn't alone. I turned the radio up, hoping to drown out the silence, but it was all static, until a voice cut through, soft and broken, whispering, "You shouldn't have stopped." I nearly jumped out of my seat. I slammed the radio off, but the whisper kept repeating in my head like it had been planted there. "You shouldn't have stopped. You shouldn't have stopped." I reached over and opened the glove box, pulling out an old St. Christopher medal my grandmother gave me when I first started trucking. I hadn't worn it in years, but I slipped it over my head, figuring at this point I needed all the protection I could get. That's when the lights flickered. Headlights dimmed and came back bright like they were straining against something I couldn't see. I hit the gas harder, heart racing, eyes darting to the mirrors even though I knew I shouldn't. I couldn't help it. My brain screamed, "Look," and so I did. The folded-in mirror on the passenger side, it wasn't folded anymore, it was straight out, pointed at the cab, and in it, I saw something. Not a person exactly, more like a silhouette, a shape made of dark smoke, seated right in the passenger seat, but there was nothing there when I looked directly, just in the mirror. It didn't move, didn't speak, just sat there, its head slowly turning toward me. I damn near swerved off the road. I reached over, yanked the mirror back in, and hit the brakes, pulling onto the shoulder. I sat there, engine idling, heart pounding like a jackhammer. That's when I remembered what Ellen had said. Keep moving. Don't stop too long. I shoved the truck into gear and got back on the road, but I didn't drive fast. I just cruised. Steady, eyes locked forward. No music, no distractions. Only the sound of tires on pavement and the low hum of the engine. But even then, even after all that, I could feel it, whatever it was. Still riding shotgun, silent and patient, waiting for the next stop. I didn't sleep that night, not even a minute. I drove until the sky started turning gray, until the outline of the mountains showed up like shadows against the morning haze. I pulled into a diner just off exit 213, the kind of place that smelled like burnt coffee and fry grease, the kind where the waitresses call you Han and the regulars don't ask questions. I parked the rig out back where the sun could hit the windshield, hoping maybe that would chase off whatever was still clinging to me. I sat down at the counter and ordered eggs and toast, but my stomach was twisted up like barbed wire. I kept glancing out the window, expecting to see something, someone, sitting in my cab, waiting for me to come back. The waitress must have noticed how shaken I was because she leaned in and said, "Long haul?" I nodded, didn't say much, just stared into my coffee. Then she said something that made my skin crawl. "You see him too?" I looked up. "See who?" She pointed out the window toward the truck. "The man in the passenger seat. We get drivers in here sometimes who've seen him. They all say the same thing, shadowy figure, doesn't speak, just watches. Most of them never make it back down the road again." I tried to laugh it off, but it came out weak. "What happens to him?" I asked. She just shook her head and refilled my coffee. "They disappear. Some vanish off the map completely. Others get found weeks later, truck abandoned, eyes wide open like they saw something that broke their brain." That stuck with me. I left a big tip, even though I barely touched the food, and walked back out to the truck. I stood there staring at the passenger seat before I got in, like maybe I'd catch it off guard if I looked fast enough. But nothing was there. Not when I opened the door. Not when I slid into the driver's seat. Still, the air was wrong. Too cold for a morning that should have been warm. Too still, like the world had hit pause. I fired up the engine and the GPS immediately rerouted me again to a road I'd never heard of. This time it was called Widow's Bend. Not a real place. Not on any map. But the arrow on the screen pulsed like it was urgent. I hesitated, but my hands were already turning the wheel. I merged back onto the highway heading toward Widow's Bend, with the seat beside me feeling just a little too full and the sun behind me casting shadows that didn't quite match the shape of the cab. I kept my eyes on the road, but every few seconds I found myself glancing over at the passenger seat. Nothing, just an empty seatbelt, swaying slightly like maybe I'd braked too hard or hit a pothole. But the road was smooth. Too smooth. Widow's Bend wasn't just off the grid. It felt like it was off the planet. The pavement looked brand new, not a single crack or faded line. No traffic, no signs, not even mile markers. The only sound was the steady hum of my engine and the occasional rattle from the trailer. My GPS had gone quiet. No voice directions, no music. Just that arrow, pulsing red, leading me deeper into nowhere. I should have turned back. Every instinct screamed at me to spin the wheel, find a familiar road, get back to the interstate where there were lights and other people and places that made sense. But I didn't. I couldn't. It was like something had taken hold of me, like I was just along for the ride. The sky started darkening again, even though it was still morning. Thick clouds rolled in fast, too fast, swallowing the sun like a curtain being yanked shut. The trees lining the road leaned inward, tall and narrow like silent watchers. Then, I saw something up ahead, a figure standing dead center in the road. I hit the brakes and the rig groaned, tires screeching as I came to a stop just a few feet in front of it. The figure didn't move. I flipped on the high beams. What I saw made my blood go cold. It looked like a man, but its eyes reflected the light like an animal's. No pupils, no emotion. Just twin beams of silver staring straight through the windshield. I honked the horn, long and loud. It didn't flinch. It didn't even blink. Then slowly it raised one arm and pointed to the right side of the road, into the woods. I rolled down the window just a crack, listening. Silence. No birds, no wind. Not even the idle of the truck anymore. The engine had cut out. I hadn't even noticed. I turned the key. Nothing. Not a sound. I looked back up, and the figure was gone. But where it had pointed, I could see a narrow dirt path, barely wide enough for a pickup, let alone an 18-wheeler. I should have stayed put. I should have waited for the sun to come back. But that feeling was back. That thing riding shotgun, breathing cold on my neck. I shifted into neutral, then low gear, and started rolling the truck slowly toward the Maori path. And I swear, as the wheels hit the dirt, I heard a voice whisper from the radio, even though it was still off. Now you'll see. I felt every hair on my arm stand up. Now you'll see. It echoed in my head like a memory I never made. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel as the truck crept down that narrow path. The trees pressed in closer on both sides, branches clawing at the sides of the trailer like fingers trying to get in. I should have stopped, reversed, done anything but keep going, but I didn't. The path wound tighter, the truck rocking over uneven ground. I swear I could hear footsteps crunching in the woods on either side, keeping pace with me, always just out of sight. My mirrors were useless. Fog rolled in behind me like a curtain sealing off the world I came from. It wasn't just a fog you saw. You felt it. Heavy like something sitting on your chest, pressing down with every inch I drove forward. Then the path opened up. A clearing, maybe 30 yards across. Dead silent. In the center was a cabin. Old, half-collapsed, looked like it hadn't seen a living soul in decades. And yet, the lights were on. Not flickering candles, not gas lamps. Modern, yellow-white lights glowing through the slats of rotted wood like it was wired into the grid. That made no sense. There were no lines, no poles, no signal. And yet, there it was, glowing like it knew I was coming. My truck hissed as I set the brakes, not sure why I stopped. I didn't plan it. My hands were moving on their own. I opened the door and stepped out. The cold hit me like a wall. Not the kind of cold you get on a winter run. This was something deeper. It felt like it reached under your skin and squeezed. The forest around the clearing was too still. No movement. No sound. Not even wind. Just me, the truck, and that cabin. I took a few steps forward. The gravel crunched under my boots. That's when I saw it. A man, if you could call it that, standing just inside the doorway. Tall, thin, too thin. His arms looked like they were made of wire, long and stiff, bent at angles that didn't seem natural. His head tilted to one side like a broken doll. And those eyes, those same silver eyes from the road, glowing faintly in the shadows. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared. I should have backed up, turned around, anything, but I couldn't. My feet kept moving. 1 step. 2. I crossed the threshold into the cabin, and as soon as I did, I swear I heard every door on my rig slam shut behind me, one after the other. That's when I realized I wasn't alone in the woods. I was inside something else, entirely, something that had been waiting for me. Inside that cabin, the air changed. It wasn't just cold, it was suffocating, thick like breathing through wet cement. The light flickered once, then held steady, casting long, stretching shadows along the splintered floorboards. The walls were warped and decayed, yet the place had this stillness, like time had stopped ticking the second I stepped through the door. The man, or thing, was still standing just inside the doorway, watching me without blinking. His head cocked further, like he was trying to understand me, or maybe waiting for me to understand something myself. My instinct screamed at me to leave, to run back to the truck, but my legs wouldn't listen. That's the worst part, when your own body turns against you. I heard a faint creaking upstairs, slow and steady, like someone pacing. Then it stopped. A beat of silence, then a whisper from the darkness above. He brought the key. I didn't know what they meant, but I knew deep down that it was me they were talking about. I tried to speak, to demand answers, but my voice wouldn't come. Instead, the cabin began to shift around me, not physically, but visually. The walls looked like they were rippling, like heat waves rising off asphalt, distorting everything. The floor beneath my boots suddenly felt like it was breathing, like I was standing on the chest of something massive and sleeping. Or maybe pretending to sleep. From the corner of my eye, I saw figures watching from the gaps in the walls. Shadowy, flickering shapes just out of full view. They didn't move like people. They moved like reflections, not quite synced with the room. That's when the tall man finally spoke. His voice didn't come from his mouth, it came from inside my head, low and coiled tight like a spring ready to snap. "You've been chosen to carry it," I asked, somehow. "Carry what?" He didn't answer. Instead, he slowly raised one arm and pointed to the corner of the room where a wooden crate now sat. I swear it wasn't there a moment ago. It was small, no bigger than a microwave, bound in thick iron chains etched with symbols I didn't recognize. The air around it shimmered like it was giving off its own heat or vibration. Against every screaming instinct in me, I walked toward it. The moment I touched the crate, the floor dropped out from under me and I felt like I was falling through the earth itself. The cabin, the trees, the man, they vanished. I was surrounded by a swirling black void, voices rushing past my ears like a hurricane of secrets, things I didn't want to hear. "Don't open it, don't look inside," one whispered. But something deeper said, "It's yours now." It always was. When I came to, I was back in the driver's seat of my truck, engine running, headlights cutting through the morning. Mist. The crate was sitting in the passenger seat. No chains, Just a single word carved into the lid in a language I shouldn't have known, but somehow understood. It said, "Deliver." And I knew, without a doubt, I was not the first to be given this job, and I wouldn't be the last. I didn't touch the crate again. Not right away. I just sat there in the driver's seat staring at it while the truck idled like nothing had happened. But everything had changed. I could feel it. The air inside the cab was heavy, like the pressure you get before a big storm rolls in. That thing, whatever was inside the box, it had weight beyond the physical. My fingers itched just looking at it. Every part of me screamed to throw it out the door, to leave it behind on the side of the road and never look back. But that wasn't going to happen. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew it wouldn't let me. It was mine now. Just like that. I took a shaky breath and pulled out onto the highway. The crate didn't move. It just sat there, silent and ominous, like a coiled serpent waiting for the right moment to strike. I drove for hours without stopping, trying to put as much distance as I could between me and that cursed cabin. But the road didn't feel the same anymore. It twisted and turned in ways I didn't remember, even on routes I'd driven 100 times before. Signs were missing. Mile markers skipped numbers. Once I passed a gas station I'd visited years ago, but it looked abandoned. Dusty pumps, shattered windows, and a flickering neon open sign even though there wasn't a single soul in sight. I didn't stop. I kept going, every now and then glancing at the crate like it might vanish if I blinked too long. That night I parked in a quiet pull-off near an old rest area. I locked the doors, shut off the engine, and tried to get some sleep, but I couldn't. Not with the whispers. They started soft, like a breeze slipping through a crack in the window. But then they grew louder. Not words at first, just sounds. Scratching, breathing, maybe even crying. And then one voice, clear and unmistakable, spoke from the crate. "You're late." I bolted upright, heart hammering in my chest. I turned on every light in the cab, grabbed my flashlight, and pointed it straight. At the crate, nothing, no movement, no sound. Just that same word on the lid. Deliver. I didn't sleep that night. I sat up behind the wheel, staring out into the darkness, waiting for something else to happen. At some point, I must have dozed off, because I woke up at dawn with the crate still in the seat, but now it was open. Not all the way, just a sliver, like a curious mouth cracked slightly to whisper a secret. I didn't look inside. I couldn't. But I swear I saw something move inside, something that shimmered like smoke and shadows. That's when I realized I wasn't just carrying the crate. It was carrying me. Wherever it wanted to go, I'd have no choice but to follow. The Al-Karmam road stretched ahead, endless and unforgiving. But my mind was a tangled mess of fear and disbelief. I gripped the steering wheel tighter than ever before, trying to ignore the cold sweat trickling down my back. The crate sat beside me, its broken latch swinging slightly as if breathing, alive in some twisted, unnatural way. Every mile I drove felt like a battle between my will and whatever dark force was clinging to that box. I knew the stories. Truckers talking about haunted loads, cursed highways, and vanishings that no one could explain. Hell, I never believed a word of it until now. The radio flickered again, cutting through the silence with static. Then a faint voice whispering, "My name. Keep driving, don't stop." The voice was low, chilling, but oddly compelling. I wanted to slam on the brakes, pull over, and throw the crate out the window into the ditch, but something held me back. Maybe it was the voice. Maybe it was the crate itself. Maybe it was the road twisting and darkening ahead, pulling me deeper into a nightmare I couldn't escape. Hours passed, or was it days? Time lost meaning on that cursed highway. The scenery blurred, morphing into shadows and ghostly shapes that danced just beyond the edge of my headlights. I caught glimpses of figures standing on the roadside, silent, watchers cloaked in darkness, their faces hidden, but every time I blinked, they vanished. One night I stopped at a lonely truck stop with flickering neon lights and cracked windows. The place was empty except for an old man hunched over a cup of black coffee. His eyes met mine, and he nodded solemnly. "You've got the devil's cargo," he said without a trace of surprise. Ain't no ordinary freight. That crate's been traveling longer than you've been alive, and it don't like to be messed with. I tried to ask more, but he was gone by the time I blinked. Just an empty booth and the faint smell of burnt coffee. The crate seemed to pulse with a heartbeat of its own, and I could swear the whispers had grown into a chorus, warning me, mocking. Me reminding me that I wasn't alone on the highway anymore. Every night I'd see eyes watching me from the rearview mirror, shadows moving in the back of the cab, cold fingers brushing against my neck when no one was there. I started keeping a loaded pistol within reach, not because I thought it'd do any good, but because it was the only thing that made me feel even a little bit safe. The weight of the crate grew heavier, like it was dragging my soul down into some dark abyss. I tried calling dispatch, telling them about the cargo, begging for help or advice, but every call dropped, every connection lost. It was like the crate was cutting me off from the world. And that's when I realized this wasn't just a load to deliver. It was a trap, a test, maybe even a curse that would follow me until the highway swallowed me whole. But I'm a trucker. I don't quit. I keep driving, keep fighting, sharing these stories because maybe, just maybe, someone out there will listen and stay safe. Because out here, on the endless black ribbon of asphalt, you never know what's riding shotgun. And sometimes it's not a friend. I kept pushing down that highway, the miles piling up like the weight on my chest. Nights were the worst. The darkness wasn't just around me, it felt like it was inside me, clawing at my thoughts, twisting them into something I barely recognized. The crate never stopped humming that low, unsettling tune, like some heartbeat echoing through the cab. I swear I caught glimpses of faces, distorted screaming, pressed against the inside of the crate's wood like they were trapped, begging for release or maybe warning me to run. But I couldn't. Something about this load, this road, it had me locked in a grip tighter than any freight strap. One night the radio started acting up again. Static first, then a soft, scratchy voice. It wasn't coming from the station. It was close, like someone was whispering right next to my ear. "Turn back," it said, slow and deliberate. "Turn back before it's too late." My heart hammered, but I slammed the truck into gear and pushed forward. Fear was a heavy passenger, but I refused to let it drive. Further down the road, fog rolled in thicker than I'd ever seen. The headlights barely cut through it. Shapes moved just beyond the glow, shadows shifting, flickering like flames. I blinked, and suddenly a figure appeared right in the middle of the lane. Not a hitchhiker, not a lost soul. Something else entirely. Pale skin, eyes hollow and black, and a grin that chilled me to my core. I swerved hard to avoid it, heart pounding so loud I thought it had burst through my ribs. When I finally reached the next truck stop, I was shaking so bad I could barely steady my hands. Inside, the air was thick with silence. No other drivers around, just me and that crate. I tried to open it, thinking maybe the answers were inside, but the latch wouldn't budge. It was like the crate was sealed by something beyond locks and keys. That's when I saw it. Scratches on the wood, deep and fresh, spelling out words I couldn't quite make out in the dim light. I rubbed my eyes, but when I looked back, the marks were gone. Or maybe they were never there. Maybe I was losing my grip on reality. The next morning I called my buddy Joe, another trucker who's been on the road longer than anyone I know. When I told him about the crate, the voices, the eyes in the back, he was silent for a long time. Finally he said, "You've got yourself caught up in something old and bad. That crate's no ordinary cargo, man. It's carrying something that wants out, something that's been waiting for someone stupid enough to carry it." I wanted to laugh it off, but deep down I knew he was right. I was trapped in a nightmare that didn't end with the dawn. But giving up wasn't an option. So I kept driving, sharing this story, hoping it reaches someone who'll listen and steer clear. Because on the highway, sometimes the scariest things aren't the trucks you see, they're the ones you don't. And trust me, you never want to be the one carrying the curse. All right, here's how it wraps up, because every long haul has to hit the home stretch, even a story like this. After all the strange noises, the flickering lights, the crate that hummed like it had a heartbeat of its own, I finally knew I couldn't carry this burden alone anymore. I pulled over one last time, way out past any signs of civilization, where the highway melts into nothing but trees and shadows. I opened that crate, expecting the worst, but instead, there was nothing. Just an empty box, cold and silent. No faces, no whispers, no curse, just the echo of my own fear bouncing off the wood. It hit me then. Maybe the real horror wasn't what was in the crate. It was what the highway did to you, what it pulled out from inside you when you're alone, for miles and miles. Fear, doubt, memories of the ones you've lost, the ghosts of the road. The crate was just a vessel, a trigger for all the things I'd been running from. I shut it tight, strapped it down, and started the engine. That night, the road seemed less dark, the shadows less alive. Maybe the curse was lifted, or maybe I finally faced the one thing I'd feared most, myself. So here I am, telling you all this from behind the wheel, hoping my story keeps you safe. Because out there on the endless highway, you never really know what's riding shotgun. But whatever it is, you gotta keep your eyes open, your wits sharp, and your hands steady on that wheel. That's the only way you make it through the night. Thanks for riding along with me. Stay safe out there.